Hello and welcome to our 5 minutes with Ekaterina Russian poetry. Our poet for today is Aleksander Blok. He is the representative of so-called silver age of Russian poetry, along with Marina Tsvetaeva and Anna Akhmatova, biographies of whom we have already discussed together. You just can go back and watch these videos if you haven't seen them yet. And here was also the representative of Russian symbolism, which means that when he started his poetical career, he tried to hide in the words he was writing some kind of other meaning that is not so obvious if you're just approaching straightforward to his poetry. And as most of the poets whose biographies we were discussing together, he had a very complicated personal life. He had a very complicated life experience, which probably helped him to create and to write such nice verses. His personal life was complicated starting from very beginning. When he was a child, his mother left his father. She was only 18 years old, but the father of Alexander was abusive towards his wife, and he started to be abusive towards small Sasha at the time. And mother just took a child and left her husband. She lived with her mother, and they traveled across Europe at the time. He's seen a lot in Europe when he was a very small child. And starting from the age 5, he was writing small poetries, and when he was very small at home, everybody supported him, and he was editing and writing a small magazine which was in only one notebook, and it wasn't distributed anywhere, but it was crossing, circulating inside of the family circle, which was very sweet. When he was a child still, his mother fell in love, and she made the church to allow her to divorce her first husband, and they never were close with the father. Alexander was never close with his father. And this event, and it wasn't normal at the time. Again, as for present day environment now, it's very normal. But Alexander Blok was born in 1880, and at that time when there was still the Tsar Russia or Emperor Russian Empire at the time, and he was the representative of nobility, but not nobility close to the emperor, but this kind of more poor nobility, which were not very happy with the Tsar at the time. So they didn't have enough money, or like a lot of money. But they were the representatives of upper class, and in upper class at the time, just divorcing somebody, even if he was abusive, and finding another man, that was hard to imagine. And of course, people treated Alexander differently because they knew that he's that boy from another marriage. And with his stepfather, he had very good relationships, not too close, but he never called him father, for example, and but he called him on his middle name, with his diminutive, not the middle, but diminutive first name. And writing poems, Alexander was very well developed, very well educated, and firstly he wanted to connect his life with law, and he went to the law faculty of the St. Petersburg University. He was born in St. Petersburg, and he lived almost all his life, excluding these short travels and excluding the First World War time. He was living in St. Petersburg, and he firstly entered the lawyer's department in St. Petersburg University, but after 2 years of studies, he decided that he is more interested in poetry, in literature, and he is changing the faculty, and he is starting to learn Slavistics at the same university. Here we are starting to meet some strangeness in him, because when he was 16, he fell in love with a woman who was much older than him, like 20 years older, I think, and they started a relationship. And a very funny fact that after the death, they kept it secret, and after the death of Aleksander Blok, he died very young, at the age of 41. His first lover, she was still alive, and he was saying everybody that she had relationships with Blok, who was famous at the time, and nobody believed her. They thought that she's insane, which was partly true, because she spent the last years of her life in Odessa mental institution. But after her death, on her attics, they found 12 letters of Aleksander Blok, and they were attributed to him. And that was love letters, and they disclosed that they did have the relationships. Of course, the mother of Aleksander Blok was against these relationships. They were the same age with this woman, and her name was Ksenia, and they were the same age as Ksenia, and of course, it was impossible to have these relationships for a long time. And when Blok was 18 years old, he is meeting the daughter of Dmitry Mendeleev, and Dmitry Mendeleev, probably you know that something is here. Dmitry Mendeleev is the creator of this famous chemical table. It's called Mendeleev's table, when all chemicals they organized in a way of their value, and he was the man who did it. If you remember the story about the man and apple falling on his head, that was him, and there were no apple by the way. But he had a beautiful daughter, and Aleksander Blok fell in love with her, still having the relationships with his first love. And after several years, he is proposing, and Lyubov saying yes, Lyubov Mendeleeva saying yes. And here this new strangeness happens. According to memoirs of Lyubov herself, they never had intimate relationships with her husband. And when they were married, they had so-called free marriage, when he had relationships outside of the marriage and she had relationships outside of the marriage. And they just lived together, and according to, again, memoirs and according to feedbacks from everybody, they loved each other passionately. But they never had normal husband and wife relationships, which for me is extremely strange. Why? And it was strange to Lyubov herself too. Despite that, she inspired Aleksander Blok so much that his first serious collection of poetry was fully dedicated to her. And this collection of poetry, it was 687 poems. It was a huge collection of romantic, lyrical, symbolical poetry dedicated to his wife. Lots of these poems were about his wife, with whom he never was physically close. And of course, when you have such a strange relationships, there would be some strange things after, like inside of these relationships. And that was the case here, because in 1909, Lyubov is pregnant, and she had a child from another man, and they agreed with Aleksander Blok to raise this child as their own. That was a son, but being only 9 days old, the boy dies. And also the same time, almost at the same time, the father of Aleksander Blok dies too. And these two deaths at the time when poet was 29 years old, and probably you know that it's the age close to 30 when we are reevaluating everything. That was a great stroke to Aleksander. It was even more powerful than political events. Of course, it was more powerful because it was more personal, but it was only 4 years after the revolution in Russian Empire, the first revolution, and political changes, and their life was changing too because he welcomed revolution. His poetry is changing, and then there's big personal unhappiness because of loss of father and the child which he was going to raise as his own. It makes Blok very depressed and mentally unstable, so he and his wife, they went to travel in Europe. There Blok realized that symbolism is too romantic and it's not a serious poetry, and the very big changes in his poetical life happens. He decided to go away from symbolism and to write more straightforward, more life-based, life-oriented poems. When they are back to St. Petersburg, he started to drink a lot, and he thought that maybe a good idea is to spend as much time in the low society as he can. So he went to the train station area with lots of pubs, and he chose one pub which was dirty and not nice, and he drank there the whole day. And when drinking in this pub, one day he just imagined something, and probably somebody just came there, and he is writing one of the poems which now are enlisted in 100 best Russian poems ever. It is called Unknown Woman. Some people are trying to link it to his lover, who was an actress at the time, but we don't have any good ground about it, if it's her or not. It's the picture, the portrait of this unknown woman was a little bit similar to the picture of his lover, so lots of people who knew them, both of them, they thought that it was dedicated to her, but it's called literally Unknown Woman, and it's divided into three parts, firstly describing the depression of life and then describing the woman itself. That would be our first poem for today. So in this dirt, in these bad days, he's writing one of the best poems ever written in Russian language. And then, of course, time goes on, and he has less and less money. Their family relationships are not that good, but they're trying their best to have this marriage going on. They never had common children, because of the reason I told you, and Lyubov also have never had any children of her own, so it was just a big tragedy of their life. Again, at the time, the child in the family, it was important. It was different. His times, the times of Aleksander Blok, they were completely different comparing to our times even. In 1914, the First World War started, and Aleksander Blok had to go to the army. He tried his best not to go at war zone, and he succeed for 2 years, but in 1916 he went to Belarusian frontier, but he never participated in battles themselves. He was just filling the tables, and that was his duty during this war. And he was the one who welcomed the revolution in Russian Empire. He welcomed Bolsheviks, and he thought that life will be changed. Bolsheviks firstly tried to use his popularity and tried to use his noble status to show that everybody should switch sides and everybody should support Bolsheviks. But they understood that they cannot manipulate him forever. They manipulated with his names, but they tried everything to keep him busy, and they tried everything to silence him. They didn't want him to write about the real life under the Bolsheviks regime. So he was participated in different committees. He was even participated in questioning the prisoners, the noblemen at the time, and some of them he knew them either personally or because of the rumors which surrounded these people before. And he was literally writing the protocols, and he was signing the protocols of their questioners in prison. He wanted to contribute into revolution, but he was one of the victims of this revolution too. After it, all the money of the family disappeared, and he had to take these small jobs which were not about writing. He didn't have any time to write anything, and he was very sick at the time, and he asked Bolsheviks to let him go to cure, like in Europe, to cure himself, and they said no. And they were keeping to say no, and he was stressed, and his last poem called 12 about how the revolution started, and he compared Bolsheviks with apostles following Jesus Christ, and everybody was criticizing him because at the time those people who were supporting Tsar, they were very religion, and remembering Jesus for them, it was terrible, and Bolsheviks were atheists, and again remembering Jesus, it was terrible for them. So he had a very big problems with these poems. Nobody wanted to publish it, but from the one hand, but common people read it from another hand. So feeling bad physically, he was feeling not well mentally, and the last days of his life, the last even months, he refused to eat. He wanted to go abroad. He didn't want to stay in Soviet Russia anymore. And some people say that he became mental during this last month, and he died partly because of the hunger, because he refused to eat, and also he died in the poverty because of this new regime. It happened in 1921. And one of other symbolical poems, late poems, but with entitlement of this symbolism, is a very short one, the verses about the repeated circle in life, and probably these verses show how disappointed he was and how changes he was expecting were never happening. Being so well studied, the life of Aleksander Blok was interesting, and there are lots of episodes that are worth of closer look on them. I didn't mention anything about him and theater, and there are lots of small details that are impossible to describe in the short video. Maybe I'll do a separate one about like small episodes, and we will discuss them together. But right now let's go to the reading, and let's read two of the most famous his poems. The first one is The Unknown Lady, and the second one is The Pharmacy, the Street, and the Lantern. Let's go to the reading. Александр Блок, «Незнакомка». По вечерам над ресторанами горячий воздух дик и глух, и правит окриками пьяными весенний и тлетворный дух. Вдали над пылью переулочной, над скукой загородных дач, чуть золотится крендель булочной и раздается детский плач. И каждый вечер за шлагбаумами, заламывая котелки, среди канав гуляют с дамами испытанные остряки. Над озером скрипят уключены, и раздается женский визг, а в небе, ко всему приученный, бессмысленно кривится диск. И каждый вечер друг единственный в моем стакане отражен, и влагой терпкой и таинственной, как я, смирен и оглушен. А рядом у соседних столиков лакеи сонные торчат, и пьяницы с глазами кроликов «in vino veritas» кричат. И каждый вечер в час назначенный, или это только снится мне, девичий стан шелками схваченный в туманном движется окне. И медленно, пройдя меж пьяными, всегда без спутников одна, дыша духами и туманами, она садится у окна. И веет древними поверьями ее упругие шелка, и шляпа с траурными перьями, и в кольцах узкая рука. И странной близостью закованный смотрю за темную вуаль, и вижу берег очарованный и очарованную даль. Глухие тайны мне поручены, мне чье-то солнце вручено, и все души моей излучены пронзило терпкое вино. И перья страуса, склоненные, в моем качаются мозгу, и очи синие бездонные цветут на дальнем берегу. В моей душе лежит сокровище, и ключ поручен только мне. Ты право пьяное чудовище, я знаю, истина в вине. Ночь, улица, фонарь, аптека, бессмысленный и тусклый свет, Живи еще хоть четверть века, все будет так, исхода нет. Умрешь, начнешь опять сначала, и повторится все как встарь. Ночь, ледяная рябь канала, аптека, улица, фонарь. That was it. That were two of our poems for today. Tell me what do you think. Tell me what do you think about the contrast of this drinking pub and the beautiful lady. Is it just him being drinking and imagining things, or a real woman coming every day in there and giving him a hope? And also, let me know what do you think about the second poem, about this circle which is going on, and anything can be changed for real. Both of these poems, they were written a little bit before the struggles, and they were like prophets. They showed the future life of the poet. The first one was written in 1906, when he was 26 years old, and the second one, it was written in 1912, several years before the revolution in Russian Empire, before Bolsheviks came. And also, of course, let me know what do you think about the personal life of Aleksander Blok, and I'm asking again and again if the genius should be that eccentric, if there's something wrong with all these geniuses. Let me know what do you think again, and thank you very much for watching. The separate thank you to my patrons on Patreon. It's because of your support I'm highly motivated to improve my videos, to find more and more interesting information, and just to discuss it all together. Just consider, if you can, support me on Patreon. If you can't do it right now, subscribe for this channel, put your likes on, just supporting me as you can. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to meet you very soon. Goodbye.